Welcome back to another Synth Secrets. Today we're going to take a look at Overmono pads. With a splurge of takedowns on multiple platforms from people using the same sounds available in sample distribution services, why not up your own skills and make the sounds you hear in your head? Getting some fundamentals in place could really help, but if it's not for you, be like Fortet. It clearly works for him. When we heard Overmono's Good Lies from the 2023 widely praised album Good Lies, it was almost impossible to ignore the sound of the Juno-106. A few years ago we wrote how it is the best synth of all time. A contentious claim of course, but not without merit. The 106 is a dance music production staple. It was a hit on its release in 1984, was rediscovered by house and techno producers in the 1990s, and remains a sought after model on the vintage market. Thanks to its surprisingly thick sound, the chorus is legendary for a reason, and bass boost in the high pass filter circuit, it's graced classic after classic record. Sadly, we don't have one to hand, but we do find the digital emulation in Roland Cloud pretty close. Adds some parameters not found on the original as well. So this is the sound we're going for, heavily inspired by Overmono. We'll build it step by step. It's really not that tricky, that's the beauty of the 106, but we're throwing some history as we go. In your DAW, create a new MIDI track and add the Juno-106. If you don't have it, you can try it for free, there's a link below. Now make sure it's initialized, and you can do this by selecting a blank patch. Choose the 8 range setting for the oscillator, and then draw or play in some appropriate chords. So let's start with the obvious place, the oscillators. But a quick bit of history. The 106 originally had DCOs, not VCOs, and were set by a microchip to keep them from drifting out of tune. What this means in practice is a very clean, almost shiny sound. That is the trademark Juno tone. And unlike some synths, the Juno-106 lets you combine waveforms for a thick sound. This helps you get around the fact that there's only one oscillator. Start by bringing up the sawtooth slider to full power. This will form the bulk of our pad. You can leave the square wave slider at the halfway position for additional harmonics. Finally, add in some sub-oscillator for thickness and noise for texture. To keep our pad from sounding too static and sterile, let's get the LFO involved. The 106 only had a single LFO, and the Cloud version maintains this setup but does let us assign the LFO to multiple destinations. Start by bringing the LFO rate up, about a quarter of the way, for a laid back fill. Next assign it to the oscillator pitch to give it some loose vibrato. In the DCO section, raise the LFO slider just a hair. We want some subtle movement. Anything more will sound seasick and woozy. Finally, set the PWM pulse width modulation to LFO and adjust the PWM slider to taste. This will cause the square wave duty cycle to oscillate slightly, adding an extra layer of motion. Moving to the right across the synths panel, let's take care of the filtering. The filter settings are very simple for this pad. Just bring up the frequency, it's abbreviated to freak on the slider, until it starts to fizz. Next, turn to the HPF or high pass filter. The non-resonant high pass filter is pretty standard on 1980s Roland analog poly synths. This serves two functions on the 106. One, you can remove unnecessary low frequencies as you would with an EQ, and two, it adds an additional layer of sound shaping. As we're dialing in a pad, we want to leave room for the coming bass line. We don't need any lows, so push it all the way up. As a point of reference, play with the high pass filter and hear how the tone changes in the mids and highs. It's subtle, but there is an effect. Now let's take care of the amplitude envelope. This 106 has two envelopes, one more than the original hardware. Envelope 1 is hardwired to the filter, envelope 2 handles amplitude duties. We're not making any changes to the filter envelope, so turn your attention to envelope 2. Our sound is a pad, but it has almost a sample-like envelope. This functions like a callback to classic dance music tracks, where producers often sampled notes and even chords from analog synths into samplers. So let's set the attack on envelope 2 to 0, bring the decay up to the top, park sustain at the halfway point, and nudge the release up until you get a nice spillover between the notes. Roland intended the Juno series, Juno-6, 60 and 106, to be affordable alternatives to the Jupiter and JX lines. To keep costs down, they ended up with single oscillators. However, solar synths wouldn't sound thin. The engineers dropped in the now famous Juno chorus circuit. It's perfect for thickening up a sound, especially a pad. In the chorus section, choose setting 1 for medium speed LFO. This is duplicated in the effects section below it. Try adding some delay, the pan delay works well here, plus a plate reverb. We're just thickening the source, so don't go too overboard. We'll add more effects in a second. For the final step, let's clear even more of the lower frequencies to make room for the bass line. Add an equalizer to the MIDI track after the plugin, such as the stock EQ in Ableton Live. Roll away all of the frequencies below 1 kHz with a low shelf. Finally, drop in some additional plugins to help mix and produce the pad, such as saturation and panning. And here's our final sound.